Good morning everyone and welcome back to the channel. Many are thinking that they are not still eligible anymore given the Italian decree and so the new law that was approved last year, the law 74 of 2025. Well, this is not entirely true. Today we will talk about the so-called lack of appointment case, given of course the well-known problem, the well-known issue of getting an appointment with the Italian Consulate. Today we will explain you what is the situation right now. We are filming this video on June 20th. Of 2026, so we want to give you a brief update about the current situation, what's going on, all the cases that were approved. Also, but for transparency, we also need to talk about the cases that were not approved. So what is the situation right now? This is Marco Bersani, an Italian immigration lawyer with expertise on Italian citizenship application, and do not lose any more time. Let's start. We waited a little bit to do news video, as you maybe noticed if you're following the channel, because we were waiting to see how things were evolving during this month, the last month, and also the few weeks ago. So things are moving very quickly, to be honest. So it's also very difficult to make a video because every time you can make a video, maybe the next week everything's changed. So today is very important because not just because we had a win at the Court of Naples about a case, a lack of appointment case that was filed after the new law, so we will talk about it. But generally speaking, in the last weeks, there were other approvals coming from different courts. Keeping in mind, paying attention that each case is different, so we are just doing this video for informative purposes only, so this is not a legal consultation, this is not a legal advice, so it's just for information basically. So each case is different, and specifically now, especially now in the current time that we are living, where everything is changing, is evolving, each case is different, so there's a legal strategies that maybe fit for one case but doesn't fit for another case. So it's very important that you always consult your attorney, your immigration attorney, for being sure that your strategy suits for your specific need and for your specific case. So let's start about this type of case, so the so-called lack of appointment case. Those type of cases are some ways the most challenging one, because as you can understand, when the new law was approved, the decree actually, the emergency decree that was approved during basically from one day in another, the situation was very critical. There were plenty of people maybe waiting for an appointment into a waiting list, for example, or people that were trying since many years to get an appointment. Every time the Prenotomy website were saying not available, no appointment available, so it was actually impossible to win this lottery, because a lottery was and a lottery still is for getting an appointment with the local Italian consulate. So in this type of situation, of course, people started to panic about what was important, and we always said that it's important to not panic, take what you have, and to evaluate if you can fight for the case, challenge the case, given the fact that you are technically in the process, not formally, because there is no an appointment, so there is no a piece of paper that says that you are already in a relation with the consulate, but in some ways you are in the process because you are collecting documents, you are preparing documents, getting apostille, getting translation, sign a power of attorney, for example, so you're already starting working toward the Italian citizenship by the sign. So there's a specific process that you already started. And so what happened to these people? Well, people started, of course, as you know, if you're following all the updates, they started to challenge the new law. They started to go to the court to challenge the new law. This happened almost immediately after the new decree, the emergency decree, was approved by the government, and also after the law was approved by the parliament. Well, people already started to file some lawsuits against the government because of the emergency decree. This happened, of course, last year in 2025, and so as you know, the judicial system is not very fast, actually, also given the huge backlog many courts have for all the past cases that are still processing, and so all the decisions are starting to arrive now in mid-2026. So what is right now the outcome? So what is happening right now? We want to start by talking a recent case that we won. The case was notified to us a few days ago, on the mid of June 2026. This case was filed in Naples. The client was a US person that tried to get an appointment with the local Italian consulate in New York City. And so after collecting all the documents, after many attempts actually, the client was inserted into a waiting list. You know that the consulate in New York, for example, like other consulate, created a sort of wait list for people just waiting for a spot to be free for then getting the actual and the real appointment date. And maybe, as you know, the waiting list is not technically recognized because by the law and also by the jurisprudence, a waiting list is not supposed to exist. You have the right to have an appointment at the local Italian consulate. By the law, the consulate has maximum 2 years to decide your application. So, of course, here there was plenty of documentation. In this case, there was the waiting list confirmation, there was all the documentation. Beside all the documentation, the birth certificate, marriage certificate, death certificate, naturalization records, everything that was collected before 2025. So in this specific case, there was a case that is not a two-generation case. Of course, it was filed in September 2025, so it was filed after the new law. It was a three-generation case. And what is most important, that the Italian ancestor naturalized. So there was technically also a so-called minor case that the Italian ancestor naturalized after the birth of the next in line. So there was all the discussion about this, showing evidence about the waiting list, the attempts, so everything that was done, the big attempts, the big efforts that were done for getting this citizenship process and hopefully approved. And the judge, on June 15th, the judge approved the case. The judge made an explanation about, of course, the case was filed in September, so technically, of course, the case is under the new regulation, but what it was important actually was, that's the importance of the legal strategy, to provide the documentation showing there was a lot of attempts that were made, and also at the very end, the so-called wait list. But the wait list is actually nothing. There is no relevance of the wait list. So the applicant was there just waiting for 1 day maybe to have a date, because the waiting list, of course, doesn't also guarantee that you will have a date. At the very end, so the judge recognized the Italian citizenship by descent, given the fact there was the client was saved technically under the 3bis, the comma 3bis, under the article 3bis, for the concept, the extensive interpretation of the case filed in front of the consulate before the deadline set by the new law. So as you can understand, in this case and also the other cases, the judges are doing their job. The judge is saying, okay, this is what literally the law is saying, but given the circumstances, given what the applicants are showing me, okay, can I extensively make an interpretation of the 3bis, of the article 3bis? Yes, this was the interpretation, for example, of the Court of Naples, of this specific judge. The decision is pretty recent, of course. We talk about it also on the website. We didn't publish the decision yet because, as you know, there's a deadline for a potential appeal, so we didn't publish the decision, the full text of the decision on the website. We are waiting for the expiration of the appealing window, and if nobody will appeal, if the ministry will want that we appeal, the Avvocatura dello Stato won't appeal, we will of course publish the decision, because we believe in sharing the information, sharing all the result, because they can help, of course, other people to challenge their case. But this is not the same. This is not the only result. There are also other results in the last weeks, in the last month. Different cases, different court. For example, Bologna, in Brescia, other cases also in the same Napoli. Pay attention about this, because this is one of, generally when we have some consultation call, is one of the questions. When you have a case that is won at the Court of Naples, for example, doesn't mean that for sure if you have the case filed, the Court of Naples will be approved. The Court of Naples, there are different judges. Each judge is different. Each judge things with his or her head. So it doesn't mean that automatically all the judges will follow the court orientation. For example, we have a case that was won, as we said, in Napoli with a judge, and we had a similar case, so after file after the new law, that was rejected by another judge of the same court of Naples. So in this case, of course, we file an appeal. So this is very, very important to clarify. You don't have to think that if the court says, one judge of the court says, I approve that case, automatically the court will approve all the cases beside the judge will be assigned. We are still in a situation where each judge follow his or her independent orientation, and so there you can find a judge has a strict interpretation of the law and can then potentially deny your case, or you can find a judge that see all the cards on the table and understand that if you are unable to get an appointment, of course, you are also unable to claim your rights. And at the same time, of course, you cannot be damaged by a new regulation that assumed wrongly that all people were able to get appointment in the past, because it was not the situation. And so other cases, for example, let's say in Bologna, in Firenze. In Firenze there was actually a really recent interesting case, and Firenze was actually interested because at the same time the judge, but this is the common orientation of this specific court, also condemned the ministry to pay to reimburse all the legal fees given. The court says, and correctly, of course, in my opinion, the court says, well, all the situation, the lack of appointment, everything, this mess is actually your fault. You, ministry, is your fault. You know about the paralysis, you know about the problem with the appointment, and nothing was done. So basically this was the orientation. This is actually the orientation of the court of Firenze, Bologna, as I said, Firenze, Campobasso, so all other courts that are working very, very recently, but I didn't read the text yet. I heard also about a case in Palermo. There was recently approved for a lack of appointment case. So as you can understand, things are changing, evolving almost every week. For sure, other precedent, other decision will come very soon. So at the very end, we know that the things are moving with all the courts. So, and this is very, very important, because if you have a case and you can prove that you have, for example, you have some documents ready, documents were collected before the new law, you have evidence that you have tried to get your consular appointment, emails, a screenshot, video of your screen during recording of your screen during the attempt, so anything you can have. This can be really, really helpful, and we suggest to file your case, to challenge the case, because as you see, like month ago, there was no decision yet, so everything was still abstract, but now decisions are coming, and so you are seeing specifically on paper, black and white, what is actually happening, and so how the court are moving. At the same time, this is also very important, as I said at the beginning, you have not to think that if you have this type of cases, your case will be automatically recognized. The court are not moving all in the same ways. There are court approving, and at the same time there are also court that are not approving. In this case, of course, depending on the strategies that will be suggested by your attorney, by your immigration attorney, maybe it makes sense to appeal, to ask the re-examination of the Court of Appeal about the rejection that was made. So this is, of course, something that must be evaluated case by case basis. You have not to think, this is very important, that all cases right now are going to be approved. But what is important is that if you are going to now to file a case and you have the way to show your attempt, the fact that you were starting the process before, well, right now you also have a plenty of legal precedent from many courts that you can also use, your attorney can use for your case, for supporting for your claim, and to make your claim very, very, a good fight, we can say. In another video, so that's why it's important, in the future videos, so that's why it's important that you follow the channel, to follow us, you continue to follow up. In the next video, we will also talk about the 1948 cases. We know that at the current moment, there is a huge question point
on the 1948 cases. So are the 1948 cases can be still processed under the new law, how it works, and so on. We will do a video about the so-called 1948 cases. We will explain our position. We will explain why we think the 1948 cases can be still processed beside the new law. But it's something that we will cover another video because, of course, it's a really difficult and delicate question, delicate argument, of course, that requires a specific separate video. So keep following with the channel because we will talk in the next videos about it. Of course, as always, if you have questions, something you want to ask, please reach us through the contact form we have on the website. That's the immediate way to contact us to ask questions if you want a free eligibility check of your family tree. For booking a consultation call, right now it's vital to book a consultation call because each case is different, as I said. So there's not a strategy that works for most people, but each case is different with different document, with this different situation. So a case-by-case evaluation is absolutely mandatory for each case. Thank you so much for your time and see you on next videos.